wait for some more people to come in here before I get started. See who we got in here real quick. Holly, how's it going? See that there's 4 people in here. Well, 5 with me, so curious as to who else is in here. Lori, how you doing? I'm assuming the majority of people are like at work or picking up their kids from school or something. Steve, how you doing? I know it's been a while since I've made a video. Surquadium? I don't know how to pronounce it, but I've haven't seen you around, so nice to have you here. Nice distraction from some reports. What reports are those that you're talking about? Is some crazy drama going on or something? Oh, I gotcha. Oh, work reports. Yep. I have been working a ridiculous amount, so it's nice to finally get back into a video. In case you guys don't have this Too Far to Walk book yet, it's pretty good. I enjoy it quite a bit. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it's definitely interesting. How did the raffle go? I haven't watched the episode or the video about it. I'm assuming that people made away with some good prizes, and JJ Diggins got her her funds that were raised for her. All right, river bathing. Trying to pull this up real quick, or find the story that I want to talk about. Alright. Saw you on Toby's video. Man, I haven't watched any episodes of anything in a while. Looks like I need to get caught up. And nice time. That's nice people. Short and sweet. Met Forrest Fenn. Told me a funny story. And I would love to meet Forrest. I emailed him because I'm going on a tasking down to Fort Bliss for work, and I asked him if he would be able to make the time so I could meet him and have the honor of shaking his hand, and he didn't answer me, so that's that. Alright, we got 11 people in here. I can probably go ahead and get started, so that way when people, you know, get out of work or whatever and decide to watch it, they're not watching like 10 minutes of me waiting around. So, obviously, I'm sure some of you guys remember my the Secrets in the Book story that I had did with you know, where I talked about an affair being in the book and a couple of other things. And yeah, you know, some people, you know, didn't agree with it. Hey, I think it's, you know, hey, it's right there in the literature. It is what it is. But I want to make this video because I think that the subtle hints that Fenn says are in the book, I don't think it's just like a word here and there, you know, like we would find a clue in the poem. I think it's more along the lines of like reading between the lines and finding a hidden meaning. And Ernest Hemingway, he did the same thing. You know, he was famous for the iceberg theory, and you know, pretty much he had to give, you know, just a little bit of information, but the information that he was given would allow the reader, you know, if they read the context correctly, fill in, you know, that other 90% or so. And you know, he pretty much made it famous. And you know, obviously looking at Fenn's library, it's pretty easy to tell that he's a big literature guy. He likes reading. He likes stories. Obviously, he's written multiple books, so we know that he enjoys it. But then looking at his library, we know that it's what he does for fun, right? Besides his, you know, normal art collecting and whatnot. To have a library like he has to be a very extensive reader and very interested in all those books. So that's kind of what I think for, you know, the stuff that Fenn is writing in his book. So as far as it being, you know, like this little word is a subtle hint towards the starting location, I think it goes beyond that, because, you know, a word won't be so subtle or, you know, take deciphering to figure it out. But a hidden meaning will be. And if you're not reading it in the context, then if you're not reading it in the context that is meant to be read, then you're going to miss it. You're going to blow right past it. So I'm going to read this. If you have the Too Far to Walk book, it's the chapter section, whatever you want to call it, chapter 7, Concy and Me. And I think it's very interesting because it gives you a kind of, you know, in the Too Far to Walk, or the Thrill of the Chase book, Fenn mentions, you know, he mistrusts governments, and we kind of get to see that a little bit within this book. It also kind of shows that, you know, he's willing to go out of his way to help somebody. So there's that, and it's just overall a good story, and it has some humor in it too, but only if you find it. All right. This one is not so subtle. How's it going, Illinois Ghosts? I guess I should say hi to some people in the chat room. Obviously, Holly, David Kramer, it's good to see you, or see you in the chat. Rick, or Illinois Ghost. David Garlic, I'm not sure if I've seen you in here before. I want to say hi to all my new subscribers. I just haven't put out a video in quite a while. I think it's been 2 weeks, but it was a while before that one. And then Lori, I already said hi to her. And Ben Downing, good to have you here. Hey Ben, if you want to put a shout out for your Slack group in here, totally fine with me. If you're trying to get people on board, I don't want to do it without your permission. So if anybody's interested in joining a Forrest Fenn chat, you know, a 24/7 Forrest Fenn chat, maybe Ben Downing will put the information in the box right there, and you can reach out to him. So I'm going to get started, but thanks for all of you guys for coming. All right, can everybody see me okay? For some reason, YouTube just like force stopped, so I'm trying to make sure everybody can still see it. I had to refresh everything. Okay, cool. All right, so obviously for, you know, like free use or fair use, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to have to throw my own commentary into this story. So yeah, chapter 7, Concy and Me. All right, when I was a young teenager, one of my favorite places to fish in Yellowstone Park was Grebe Lake, Grebe, Grebe. It was about 150 acres in size and full of Arctic grayling and 16-inch rainbows. My dad and I always fished it 2 or 3 times during our 3-month summer stays in West Yellowstone. To get there from town, we'd drive to Madison Junction, take a left to Norris Junction, then a straight, and start looking for a small sign on the left that said Grebe Lake Trailhead. The trail was actually a narrow sandy road that was blocked by a locked gate. It was an easy 3-mile walk from the gate to the lake, even carrying enough gear to stay a couple of nights. Concy Wood, my high school football coach, frequently went to Yellowstone with us. I find it odd that he's just now mentioning, a high school teacher that came with him to Yellowstone. But of all the talks that he had within the thrill of the chase, he didn't. So, Concy Wood, my high school football coach, frequently went to Yellowstone with us. One day, he expressed the desire to fish Grebe Lake one last time. His legs were not good enough to make the walk, and he suffered from early stages of Parkinson's disease, although we didn't know it at the time. My request to the National Park Service for a one-time special medical waiver to drive Concy through the gate to the lake was turned down. The very nice letter, in reply, explained that it was long-established policy to make no exceptions, and the park executive who signed the letter made an earnest effort to explain to me the wonders of Yellowstone Park. So he denied him and then insulted him by saying, like, oh, but Yellowstone is great, pretty much throwing in like a shameless plug in there, but he's denying a request for a medical reason. I'm sure that went over real good for him while reading the letter. Alright, so we went to Plan B. I put Concy on my bicycle, along with enough camping and fishing gear for an overnight stay, and started pushing him down the sandy road. It was an arduous task that required frequent periods of rest, but I was young and vigorous. After 3 or 4 hours, we moved aside so a pretentious black limousine could pass. I watched in awe because it looked so out of place with its blackened windows and mysterious contents. It emphasized to me how necessary it was to just absorb some of life's little disappointments. So, there's a barricade on the trail. The trail leads to the lake. You have a medically disabled person that Fenn applied for a medical waiver or a medical exception to be able to drive down to the lake. He was denied under the whole there are no exceptions, but Yellowstone's great, so go check it out. So he, as a teen, I'm assuming, is pushing this guy down the road when a limousine pulls by. Can everybody still see? Because mine is frozen. Hopefully it's still working. But I have a feeling that yep, okay. Okay, so yeah, he's told, hey, there's no exceptions, and meanwhile, he's pushing this bike with a bunch of camping gear and a grown man on it suffering from Parkinson's disease down a sandy road that I'm sure that, it's a struggle just to keep him up, and, the tires are probably sinking into the sand, making it extra hard, and here comes this nice black limo, completely out of place, he says. I watched in awe because it looked so out of place with its blackened windows and mysterious contents. It emphasized to me how necessary it was to just absorb some of life's little disappointments. So, obviously, you can tell how he felt. Not feel, that's weird. Alright, when Concy and I arrived at the lake an hour or so later, remember, it's 3 miles, right? So, if he's arriving there an hour later than when the limousine drove by, it just goes to show, that they didn't have any work cut out for them. They're in a limo, they're freaking living a life of luxury, they blow right by them, and, which leads to further disappointment right here. When Concy and I arrived at the lake an hour later, the best camping spot was occupied by a large tent. 4 men wearing 3-piece suits and patent leather shoes were standing around talking and probably expounding on how wonderful it was to be out in the wonderful national park and away from the rigors of Washington, implying that these guys are politicians. All right. One of the finely suited men was wearing white sneakers. He must have been the leader. If he had walked, those sneakers wouldn't be white anymore. All right. We had expected to be the only humans at the lake, and because our desired camping spot was taken, Concy and I moved around the lake another half-mile and unpacked our gear near the water. We didn't want to camp in a crowd. The moon was full, and Concy and I thoroughly enjoyed each other's company, sleeping in the open, fishing and talking, and watching a bull moose feed on the tender grasses underwater. Just being out there is what it was all about for both of us, and I really slept well. So disappointment, his camping spot is taken. He has to push Concy Wood even farther around the lake because these politicians took their camping spot and was able to drive, even though Fenn was told there are no exceptions. All right. Early the next afternoon, Concy and I decided to head out. Storm clouds were forming, and we were at least 5 hours from the safety of our car. So between the half mile to the other side of the lake and then the 3 miles back to the gate, they're looking at 5 hours of travel time. So early the next afternoon, Concy and I decided to head out. Storm clouds were forming, and we were at least 5 hours from the safety of our car. The mist of Grebe Lake made the air look ominous white as we passed the other campers, the politicians. The big black limousine was still resting in all of its singular beauty in the freckled shade of a few pine trees with 2 flat tires. Concy said how odd it was that a car would have 2 flat tires at the same time. The VIPs appeared unwell as they stared at us, and I guessed that I was piling up demerits with aplomb, A-P-L-O-M-B, aplomb. Either way, sentiment never obtruded, and to have even spoken a word would have diminished the magnitude of the feat. As I sit here now, 66 years later, I still enjoy remembering that final fishing trip with my old friend. Alright, so this is what I'm talking about. This one, pretty easy to crack, right? But my wife didn't catch it when I was reading it to her, so I'm assuming not a lot of other people did too. A black limousine was still resting in all of its singular beauty in the freckled shade of a few pine trees with 2 flat tires. Concy said how odd it was that a car would have 2 flat tires at the same time. The VIPs appeared unwell as they stared at us, and I guessed that I was piling up demerits. Alright, sentiment never obtruded, and to have even spoken a word would have diminished the magnitude of the feat. So pretty much, if anybody would have said anything, it would have taken the glory away from him. And the reason why it would have taken the glory away from him, and the reason why it's odd that the car would have 2 flat tires at the same time, and why these people are looking unwell and staring at them, is because Fenn slashed their tires in the middle of the night, like trying to teach the politicians a lesson, right? Of like, you don't get to do whatever you want just because you're important people. Like, I wanted an exception. I was told there are no exceptions, and here you are. So that's just one thing that I wanted to bring up, and you know, I'm not sure if anybody else has caught it or not, but he says to even have spoken a word would have diminished the magnitude of the feat. As I sit here now, 66 years later, I still enjoy remembering that final fishing trip with my old friend, because he went out of his way to help somebody, right? It could have been Concy, but keep in mind, Concy could barely walk, right? And they're a half mile on the other side of the lake. So I think the feat is like the deed that Fenn had done, leading to the politician's defeat, if that makes sense. And he was proud of doing that. He kind of like stood up for his beliefs, you know, stuck it to the man, and so on and so forth. And I think that, you know, that's definitely a good story for sure. And so that was just kind of one story that kind of lets us know the type of person that Fenn was, you know. And there was another one in here, if you give me a minute to find it. I think it was about the school dance that I wanted to bring up. Okay, just give me a couple seconds here. Oh yeah, the jumping the milk truck story was hilarious. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, each of these stories that Fenn talks about, whether it's in Too Far to Walk or The Thrill of the Chase, he's telling these stories which, you know, they're happy, they're sad, they're humorous, they're depressing, but they all have like this hidden lesson in it that's meant for us, you know, to see the, you know, the type of, it allows us to look into Fenn's personality a little bit, beyond just what we see on the media, you know, the script that Fenn operates on. And I'm not saying that it's a script in a bad way. I'm saying it's a script in the sense of, like, he decided the stuff that he's going to say, and he has been continuously saying those things so he does not slip up. If he just ad-libs everything, there might be a good possibility that he slips up and he says something that he doesn't mean to say. And I think that's why he goes off from the script that he's been going off from. All right, here's another one. All right, Mom and Me. And I think, and Mr. Fenn, again, I don't mean any offense by this, but I think this is really just allowing me to elaborate more on the previous videos on the previous video that I had made. If any of you guys haven't seen the video, I made 2 videos. It's called Hidden Secrets in the Book, and it was talking about an affair in the book, or hints towards it. You know, I wasn't necessarily sure if it was, you know, just a story, because part of me thought that Fenn was adding on to other stories, or using history, certain events, other stories, and drafting a book out of that stuff. All right, especially since he says, you know, I tend to embellish just a little bit, and if the stories don't mingle, or if the stories that mingle among these pages don't appeal to you, hopefully it'll at least bring a smile to one of your dreams. And these stories are as true to history as one man can average out that truth. Nothing about that little section, that paragraph, tells me that he's talking about his history. He's talking about stories, events, historical freaking events, times, etc. And that's why he said, are as true to history as one man can average out that truth. And he further confirms that when he says, just because Napoleon said that history is nothing more than fables agreed upon doesn't mean that it's true. Well, Napoleon didn't say that. Napoleon said just because, history is a bunch of lies agreed upon. So there's fables, which is, you know, storytelling, you know, kind of just like little white lies, fairy tales type deals. And lies is to, like, deliberately deceive somebody. So Fenn says there's nothing worse than facts written wrong. Just because Napoleon said that history is nothing more than fables agreed upon doesn't mean, or doesn't make it true. Well, he's telling us that it's not true because Napoleon didn't say that, and he's further telling us that that is a fact that is written wrong. He's stating it as a fact because he's given a direct quote, but that's not what Napoleon said. So it is a fact written wrong. It's not true that he said that, and he's telling us again that it doesn't make it true. I hope that makes sense. So he's telling us these things within the book, but unless we're, you know, paying close attention, I think that's why he says go back and read it slowly and look for anything that stands out. He's wanting us to read the context of the poem. All right. So I'm going to read this one real quick. All right, Mom and Me. All right, my mother was a very special woman. We already know this because he said, you know, step on a crack, break your mama's back, and how he always followed that rule, and that's why his mom was so proud of him, and you know how he looked up to her and pretty much would have done anything for her. And there's a reasoning behind that. All right. My mother was a very special woman. Because my father had such a strong presence, it was natural for her to stay in the background. I'm going to say that again. All right. Because my father had such a strong presence, it was natural for her to stay in the background. meaning she was in the shadows. The presence of the husband was so overwhelming that she stayed like withdrawn. She was like tucked away and reserved and kind of hidden, and wasn't able to be the person that she wanted to be because of the relationship that she was in. I think Fenn looked up to his dad, and I think that, you know, his dad probably brought him on, or had some memorable experiences with him and everything else. And I think, you know, when you read towards the end of the poem, or the end of the Thrill of the Chase book, and he's talking about, you know, how his dad had said, you know, wow, son, you just made more money in 15 minutes than I made in my whole life, and stuff like that. I think towards the end, the relationship really started to, I think the Fenn's dad was trying to make up for mistakes that he had made when he was young. And like, to elaborate, right, with my affair video, I said that you didn't just leave your husband back then. Like, it was very frowned upon. And, you know, like back then, your husband could be like a woman beater, or, you know, a player, or, you know, just an overall bad person, and you did not leave your husband. Like, hands down, it didn't happen. And if it did, then you were frowned upon by everybody else. And that's why she was like the bad end of the joke, because all the gossiping women, you know, no place for biddies, you know, they were talking about his family, and, you know, they thought, you know, they said he would run away from home if he was allowed to cross the street. Well, you have to ask yourself, why would the women be gossiping about Fenn's family, and why would they be talking about Fenn running away from home? There had to have been a reason why they would say he would run away from home. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So unless you really read it and you really comprehend, you know, exactly what's being said, you're not going to know. All right? All right. Because my father had such a strong presence, it was natural for her to stay in the background. Where he was strict and demanding, she was soft and relenting. When I was about 14, I did some misdeed that my father didn't like. Evidently, a whipping wasn't punishment enough, meaning he did get a whipping, right? So he beached me instead, grounded him, right? Which meant I couldn't go to the Friday night dance. I wish that he had whipped me. Okay, so maybe he didn't. I wish that he had whipped me, which would have only lasted a few seconds, and then let me go to the social and be with my friends. My mom didn't say anything until my father left for the weekend with his fishing buddies. He talks about this again earlier in the book, about how his dad would, you know, just take off. So she wouldn't say anything if dad was around. But as soon as he took off, that's when you'd have those mother to son moments, right? So my mom didn't say anything until my father left for the weekend with his fishing buddies. Then she came and sat beside me. She said she understood how important the dance was to me, and that if I wanted to go, I could. It was just like her to do that. So she took my dress pants from the closet, ironed my best shirt, and shined my shoes. I was going to the dance. I combed my hair, kissed her goodbye, and jumped off the front porch running. The screen door slammed loudly in protest. So that's important, but he's not going to realize it until later. After a block, I stopped and turned. My mom was standing on the porch looking at me. We both waved, and I ran again. It was about a mile to the school gymnasium where the dance was held. Other kids, who were driven to the dance by their parents, saw me as I ran and passed me by. Looking back now, I think it was an omen. It was an omen because, you know how in The Thrill of the Chase, he says all the rich kids that had a ride to school, and now he's saying all these kids that had a ride to the dance, you know, they pass them by. But the reason why it was an omen is because, one, they didn't stop and ask him for a ride, right? Which kind of maybe lets you know the attitude that might have been taken towards him, or kind of, you know, how they were stuck up or something like that. But also, if they would have asked him for a ride, he would have gotten to the dance sooner and wouldn't be able to come to the realization of what he's about to come through. Jackson Park was about halfway, and I sat on a bench to rest. Something gnawed at me, and I felt strangely uncomfortable. And then suddenly I knew. I jumped up and ran, full speed, back towards home. I couldn't believe I had chosen to attend the school dance and leave my mom at home all alone. She came out of the house just as I arrived, and we had a wonderful hugging reunion. I think I grew up a little with that experience. As I write this, my mom has been dead 34 years. Today is May 12th, 2013, Mother's Day. I regret that I didn't spend more time with my mom. She died at the time when I was working hard to build my business in a distant city. That should not have been an excuse for me not seeing her more often. I hope she knows I'm sorry. So he knew, he knew that his mom was at home feeling sad and lonely because her son just went to the dance. She was trying to be admirable, right? After the husband left, he was like, hey, the coast is clear. I got your back. Go ahead and go to the dance. But after the son left, then, thank you. After he left, then she felt, now she's all alone again, and she's feeling sad. And I think that Fenn, while he was out there, he had that realization of like, wow, my dad's gone. I just left her. She's probably at home with a million thoughts going through her head right now. Like, I'm going to go and get back. And she must have had the sense that he was coming to, because they met in the front yard, right? And they hugged, and she's like, she's grateful that he had come back, and he's thankful that he wasn't selfish enough to proceed with the dance. And when he says, I regret I didn't spend more time with her because he was working on his business, but that was an excuse. That wasn't an excuse. Maybe when he's saying that, he's kind of feeling maybe he felt like he was acting more like his dad during that time of like, I'm going to focus on me, do what I want to do, and I got to do this. I got to stay focused on this. But he was neglecting, the people that he loved most when he was doing that stuff. So I will continue with another story. I'm curious about your guys' thoughts right now real quick. Even if he didn't get whipped that time, it implies there were whippings other times. Oh, alright. So I got a story for that too. Okay, and remember in The Thrill of the Chase, he says, I was in the middle, and that was significant because Skippy was older than me, so I couldn't, or how did he say it? Pretty much, he couldn't look down to June because his father wouldn't allow that, and something about, Skippy, hold on, let me see if I can pull it up. While I'm pulling it up, I'm curious as to what your guys' thoughts are on what I've said so far, because I think it's significant, and I think that I think, just like in my previous video, Fenn is hinting towards a rough type of childhood, and he might have had these great experiences, the outdoors and stuff like that, but he's also his dad was the principal, so he kind of got a free pass when he didn't really deserve it, but that means that his dad also knew all the bad deeds that he had done during school. Was Miss Ford at the dance? I don't know. It didn't say anything. And then he talks about, the gossiping that goes around town, and just stuff like that, and it's really showing you what the relationship was between him and his dad, him and his mom, the family overall, and yeah, so let me see, middle. All right, give me 2 seconds, just bear with me. Alright, me in the middle. So this is from The Thrill of the Chase. Yep, there's my daughter crying. I'm sure my daughters are arguing. Alright. My brother Skippy came along 2 years later, then it was my turn, followed by my little sister June. There were 2 years between me and both of them, so I was in the middle, and that was significant because I felt somehow surrounded. You can laugh at that if you want to, but think of it this way. Skippy was older, so I looked up to him, and June was younger, but I couldn't look down to her because my father wouldn't allow it. Does that seem fair? All right, so, on one hand, you have the first child, right? And he even implies that, Skippy was always off doing something else. Well, why was he off doing something else? Why did he feel the need to always be away from home, right? But you have the first child, right? You have the second child, which is another boy, and then you happen to have a girl, which is, you got daddy's girl, you have the first, and then you have him right there in the middle, kind of forgotten about maybe, or, maybe not taken as seriously, if that makes sense. And, I mean, I'm no freaking, psychology professor or anything like that, and I'm not trying to make this out to be like a emotional type thing. I'm just kind of going with what I'm looking at, All right, so going a little bit back into, the relationship between Fenn's dad. All right, this one's called Expensive Memories. All right, in my memoir, The Thrill of the Chase, I told a story about getting a spanking in junior high school for running across some stupid desks. Then that night, my father gave me a spanking at home because I'd gotten a spanking at school. Usually I didn't get more than one a day. Twice was rare, and it was kind of an unwritten rule. So if I got a licking in the morning, I could relax and be my normal self for the rest of the day. All right. So hey, at least he only gets one a day. All right. You got to think this is also around a time where you could actually punish your kids physically. Like a spank on the butt or whatever. Now it's like CPS is going to get called or some other ridiculous shit. All right. My father mostly had me figured out and was surprisingly intuitive. For that reason, it was hard for me to roll something past him. Just like he said up here, with Mr. Fenn being the principal and working at the school, whatever he messed up at school, his dad knew about. And he knows the pattern of his son's behavior, so it's easy to see when he's doing wrong. For instance, sometimes he'd sense that I'd committed a misdeed of some kind, but wasn't positive. Maybe he'd suspect that I'd ditched school to go fishing with Herbert Persky, or some other minuscule infraction. I never lied to him. On those occasions, he'd send me to the back hedge to pull a switch, the thickness of which I figured was commensurate with the seriousness of the alleged violation. One of my secret tricks was to pull a leaf from the hedge One of my secrets was to put a leaf from the hedge in my mouth and chew on it. It was truly a bitter taste, so it helped take my mind off what was about to happen. The size of the switch was critical to the process, so it was always a test of wits, me against my father. I quickly learned that it was not in my best interest to pull a switch that was unreasonably thin, because he'd go out and replace it with one that was exaggerated the other way. But if he was just medium mad, I'd pick a medium thick switch and forget the leaf. No big deal. On rare occasions, my father would underestimate what I'd done, and he wasn't really mad. That meant I could pick a thin switch, and it'd be a waltz around. But always during the dance, I'd exaggerate the severity of the inflicted pain, making it seem that it's worse than what he's actually feeling. That was another secret I had. And a thick handkerchief in both back pockets was good too. I was developing techniques that would serve me well when I got to high school. I haven't figured that out yet, why that technique would help him when in high school. But if my father was really, really mad, he'd head for the back hedge himself, and I knew I was about to be a star player in the World Series of switchings. The velocity with which he slammed the screen door on the way out was indicative of the rigorous of my impending whipping. Sometimes I knew my father was mad at something else and was taking it out on me. Right there. I could tell because what I'd done didn't merit the punishment, like the time I locked my little sister out of the bathroom. those lickings never hurt because I knew he was just blowing off steam. So almost like if you imagine somebody being like your punching bag or something for you to get your anger out, you know, like is Fenn implying that he was his dad's freaking stress ball or something? I was always willing to help if it made him feel better. Meaning, like, Dad, like, me and you don't have the best relationship. I'm going to allow you to do this to me, hoping that it'll bring us closer. Or hoping, you know, hey, maybe if you get your anger out right now, then you'll be calm and we can enjoy the rest of our day together. I don't know. I'm going to read that one more time so you guys can think of it kind of how you want to. All right, sometimes I knew my father was mad at something else and was taking it out on me. I could tell because what I'd done didn't merit the punishment, like the time I locked my little sister out of the bathroom. Those lickings never hurt because I knew he was just blowing off steam. I was always willing to help if it made him feel better. Besides, I was so far ahead, a good hanging couldn't catch him. Besides, I was so far ahead, a good hanging couldn't catch him up with me. Not sure what that means either. It can't be just coincidence that I never drank, smoked, did drugs, cussed, or got pierced and tattooed. Maybe we should reintroduce spanking into our school systems. I'd vote for it. What do you think? So even though he got these lickings, right, or these whippings or switchings, whatever you want to call it, he's still accrediting that to him growing up and being the type of man that he is, right? He's, you know, honorable, admirable, didn't get into like actual trouble, you know, like didn't do drugs, didn't drink, wasn't like one of those wild teens, you know, that are just out of control. Obviously, he kind of was like, he walked a fine line. You know, he even says in The Thrill of the Chase, I was beginning to learn where the edges were. Kind of, you know, he didn't break the law, but he wasn't following the rules. He knew the fine line to skirt, and he kind of just had fun. You know, he was a teenager out. He was like a little hooligan, but not to the extent of, you know, what we see teens now. So he is giving his father credit to that, but he is saying, you know, sometimes the punishment didn't deserve, or sometimes the deed didn't deserve the punishment, and how his dad was just blowing off steam, but Fenn was able to help. He was willing to help. So, you know, that's something to think about. And he says that chapter is titled Expensive Memories, meaning, you know, those memories are like beyond priceless to him, or expensive meaning, you know, like memories that he paid for. I hope that makes sense. All right. Trophy hat. Okay. All right. One more. All right, and then you know, I'll answer some questions. Let me look at the messages real quick and see what we got going on. It's easier for me to look at it on this. All right. So what do we have here? All right. Ben Downing pointed out the me in the middle. I always enjoyed your input. Thank you, T. Doggett. I appreciate it. It's good to know that some people like the stuff that I say. Ben Downing says, maybe he was learning to fake it or play along with regards to high school, quite possibly. Holly says he got paddled in high school. Okay, so that would make sense why those techniques would help him. Corporal punishment works. Many kids could use some now. I absolutely agree. As long as that the parents aren't just using the child as a tool to blow off steam. I 100% agree with, you know, a kid should be able to get spanked without it looking like abuse. I think that's the best way to word it. All right. I'm losing some viewers and then gaining some viewers, so I'm going to keep it going. I'm going to read this one more and then hopefully talk about some other things real quick if anybody's interested in me continuing on. All right, this one's called Trophy Hat. This is the straw hat my father wore fishing for bass in Texas. It dates to about 1940. and is covered with lures that he made, white and yellow feather and fur streamers to simulate minnows, poppers of cork that pretend to be frogs, and small floaters that look like grasshoppers. Safety pins were strewn around the hat, upon which the hooks were strung, thus making the hat a wearable tackle box of sorts. So it is nifty, right? Pulled the stuff off, would make a hook, and be good to go. Not have to lug around this big tackle box. All right. But now we're starting to get into the relationship type thing again. All right. Often my parents would have fish fries. Neighbors and friends came from blocks around, bringing condiments like potato salad, chips, and different kind of pickles. Dad always cooked enough fish for at least 50 people. Mom made the beans and baked the chocolate cakes. My sister, June, was instructed to mingle and charm the guests, and my brother Skippy was usually nowhere to be found. Again, he always had something better to do. My job was to pick up all of the trash. Right there. My sister, June, was instructed to mingle and charm the guests, and my brother Skippy usually was nowhere to be found, and my job was to pick up all the trash. Me in the middle. Concy Wood, my father's best fishing buddy, claimed that when Dad wore his fishing hat on Lake Texoma, half the fish surrendered and threw themselves into the boat. I can't speak of the veracity of that statement, but I know that he caught a lot of fish. Both my father and Concy are gone now, and the special hat has retired to a place of distinction in my den. Visitors look at it and laugh, being totally oblivious to the seriousness of which it was used. They don't make fishermen like they used to. Alright, so really not a whole lot to take away. You know, maybe Fenn's dad put a priority towards fishing, but hey, it also taught Fenn how to fish, right? But not a huge takeaway from that, except for, you know, that part that I had read twice about, you know, hey, June's allowed to, you know, go charm and mingle amongst the guests. Skippy's allowed to just take off, but I can't go where I want to go because you need me to pick up trash for the 50 people that you invited but don't allow me to talk to. So that's just something else. I'm not trying to go on a huge rant, right? And I hope, Forrest, if you do watch this, I hope that, you know, you're not taking offense to any of this. You know, I'm a firm believer in, you know, when Fenn decided to go public with this hunt, or before he decided, he also knew that he was putting his entire life out there for interpretations. You know, every story that he writes about his life is going to be interpreted. You know, so on and so forth. But I did want to talk about something real quick, and it's actually about the treasure. Let me see if I'm not missing anything in here. My prehistoric friends, awesome story. If you guys have the book or you're thinking about ordering the book, chapter 6 is probably my favorite. You know, maybe I'll do an episode on that. Not a huge takeaway, but I definitely think that my prehistoric friends is the poem. The poem, all the hints that Fenn has made, the interviews that he has made, the Thrill of the Chase book, it's all right here in my prehistoric friends, or at least hinting towards it, to kind of help you like decipher the clues or know what he's talking about. All right, but I'm gonna put that up, and before I get started on this next thing, I'm gonna look at this and see if anybody has anything else. Newspapers from Temple showed several teachers went to Yellowstone National Park to camp and play together. Okay, I just found it weird that Fenn didn't mention it in his Thrill of the Chase book. You know, if he has these his other teachers going with him, then you know why bring it up now? I like your interpretations of the book. Can you say if it has led to any locations? So I don't even have a state anymore. I've completely wiped the slate clean. I'm not looking at any specific state. I mean, I am for the most part. I do have one place in mind, and it's for a specific reason, and I will definitely say that that the book led me to that. Another thing that I mentioned in another video is, Fenn says that this book had to write itself, or otherwise he struggles. This one did, and how he was able to write the book within 6 weeks. I think that's because Fenn is looking at places on the map, this place name and this place name and this place name, and it's fueling the fire, right? Using those words, he's drafting a story out of those place names. Like, I found the Totem Cafe Caper in just a small map section. Everything about the pies, Frosty, freaking, the lunch, or not the lunch lady, but the waitress, and so on and so forth. So we'll see. The Thrill of the Chase book is the one that led me to that. I'm still reading Too Far to Walk, and I've barely cracked open Once Upon a While. I've been putting most of my emphasis onto The Thrill of the Chase. The problem is I can't make it far into the book because I stop and I pull out my computer and I start doing research. When Fenn says that alright, everything going good? Back on? It froze again for some reason, I don't know why. But when that he didn't anticipate people, all these people downloading Google Earth, and how he wanted to get people away from electronics, part of me feels like he's telling us to get away from the computer. And ever since this treasure hunt, that's all I've been doing, is spending time on the computer. So maybe the book is a good map. So I don't know. There's that idea. Okay, so about the treasure real quick. Okay, and if anybody's curious into into watching this video, I watched a video about property, right? Like, I think I YouTubed mislaid property, and the Fenn, I think there's a reasoning why he went about it the way that he did it, right? He didn't just release the poem and hope that everybody found it, because that's not proof enough. He had to write a book explaining what he had done, right? And then have these interviews explaining what he had done, and then he had to he had to leave an artifact, or the bracelet in the chest, explaining that he wants it back. He doesn't. I don't think he wants it back. This is boiling down into property law, right? And so if you YouTube mislaid property, there's a video. I think it's like it's a black background, a white guy talking, looks like a lawyer, kind of has like blonde or gray hair. I'll try to post the link up in this. So we have lost property, we have mislaid property, and we have abandoned property. And then you have finder's laws. So I just typed up each of them real quick. Alright, so the first one, lost property law. Alright, at common law, a person who found lost personal property could keep it until and unless the original owner comes forward. This rule applied to people who discovered lost property in public areas, This rule applied to people who discovered lost property in public areas, as well as people who discovered lost property on their property, right? So with lost property, the majority of places, the majority of states have a law, right? And that's requiring you to put a notice out there for 30 days or whatever that state deems necessary, saying, hey, I found this piece of property. If you can contact me and explain it, then I'll release it back. At the end of that time period, if it was found on a public property, it becomes yours. But you have to follow the thing. And maybe that's why Fenn says to wait 30 days before making a decision. Because if nobody finds it, or if nobody claims it as theirs, then it's legally yours, right? Once you get into finding something on private property, now we have to go into a dispute between the finder and the property owner, right? And that's why I think that it's not on private property. All right, the next thing is mislaid property, right? So mislaid property refers to a property that has been left intentionally in a certain place and later forgotten. When a property is left in a certain place by the owner with an intention to take it later, and if the owner finds it difficult to locate the property later, then such property is called mislaid property. All right, so we have Fenn had intentionally left the property at a specific location. All right, when a property is left in a certain place by the owner with an intention to take it later, and if the owner finds it difficult to locate the property later, then such property is called mislaid property. So that's going to lead into kind of the next thing, which is abandoned property. All right, so lost, mislaid, and abandoned property are categories of common law of property, which deals with personal property or chattel which has left the possession of its rightful owner without having directly entered the possession of another person. So abandoned property is a piece of property that is intentionally left somewhere for you to leave it, right? Which we know that Fenn did with that, right? But now, so abandoned property has a better potential of becoming yours if found on public ground. So if it can be proven, that the original property owner abandoned that property, then there's no legal dispute of the finder unless it's found on private property and you don't own that private property. So how do we prove that we abandoned property? We write a book with the poem in it, and we do all these interviews, and that's that's all documentation, video documentation, written documentation, so on and so forth, saying, yes, me as the original owner, I abandoned this property, right? Which gives you a legal argument in the event that, you know, the authorities try to say, or somebody else tries to claim that it's theirs, right? So essentially, what Fenn had done, he didn't lose it. It's not lost, right? Now, Fenn also put the bracelet in there, all right? The bracelet, which he says he wished he never would have, and he's not able, sure, he can locate it, but he's not able to go retrieve it himself. So now we have a combination of abandoned property with mislaid property, both of which give you the highest legal regard of keeping it, or at least that's the way that I understand it. But realistically, Fenn didn't say that he said that he wants it back, but he also said that he's hoping that the finder will give it back to him, and that he'll pay for it. So realistically, he's not trying to find it, and it's up to the finder if he wants to give it back or not. So technically, still, it's all abandoned property, and he's just hoping that he'll get that last piece back. So that brings us to, you know, the property is abandoned, and there's documentation that it is abandoned, and that's what's going to give you the highest benefit of being able to keep it. All right, especially when you're looking at the majority of artifacts that are in there, you know, some of them 500, 1,000 years old, you know. That's also a reason why the government couldn't say, oh, you know, this is an archaeological discovery, we're taking it away from you. No, it's not, because I have all this legal documentation that, hey, this is Forrest Fenn's treasure, here's his autobiography, here's the bracelet that he specifically talked about, meaning like the one, besides the autobiography, it's the one freaking identifiable thing. Now, there's also like legal disputes of the amount of people that are looking for the abandoned property. So once you have multiple searchers involved, then that can become another thing, but it pretty much just goes to the courts or up to common law decision of who found it right? And if you weren't the first one on the spot, sucks to suck, nerd. Like, if you decided to put your solve up on the internet for anybody to read and go follow it, like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. So any argument that any finder has or any searcher has of like, well, he found it using my solution and so on and so forth, so, you know, I'm entitled to this. No, you're not. You're not at all. So if you don't want people to use your solve, then don't put it up on the internet, and then they can't use your solve. But even if they did use your solve, you don't have an argument, right? And even if the government tries to say, hey, this is ours, no, it's not. It's abandoned property. It was abandoned by one person in the effort to get multiple people to come looking for it, but one person to be able to keep it. So, and then you have, you have the finder's laws, and it goes into that. So, I'm going to probably wrap this up. I'm going to read the comments real quick, and I'll put the link to that video. Alright, frozen again? Uh-oh, that's not good. Alright, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, up to Cody, Wyoming, through Casper. Alright, do you believe the chest is close to where Fenn's traveled from Texas to Yellowstone? Remember, they drove 35 miles an hour, even though there were roads you could drive 50 to 60 miles an hour on. Well, apparently they did that for to spare gas and oil because of like the rations. I think they drove the 4 search states plus Texas that route to support themselves with fishing, hunting, and free camping. Alright, my question is for you, and I did not see the first half of this, but if his childhood was unhappy, what do you think that says about him and the thrill of the chase? Part of me thinks that the poem is sad, a little bit. And it's like depressing thoughts, kind of, or sad thoughts, or, you know, beginning happy and it turns into sad, and it's helping drive you to a certain point. The thrill of the chase, I think, maybe the thrill of the chase was just seeking happiness. I don't know, he sure seemed to. The first time I read the book, I laughed. I laughed so many times. I thought it was hilarious, you know, especially, you know, I would slide down the fire escape, and you know, it marked the tail of my britches with a heavy brown color. And when I was walking down the halls, kids began to notice me and had known what I had done. People weren't noticing him because they knew that he went down the fire, or the fire escape slide. People were noticing him because they thought that he shit his pants, which is one more reason to talk about him. But the first time I read it, I laughed. Like, I thought it was funny. But then the second time I read it, it's like, oh, they're beginning to notice you, and maybe not in a positive way, but he's writing the story as his naive self as a kid, you know, looking on the bright side of things, not seeing, you know, the ugly and everything, and you know, kind of just being optimistic about everything. Alright, Rodney looks like he's being held up. Someone pointing a gun at Rodney. Me? I don't see anything in my camera. Alright, yeah, he is caught red-handed. Must be Fenn. Alright, I'll give you the tip of my iceberg. I believe it's in a nice backup. Or what does that say? I believe it's a nice backup in case the government finds it. What do you think is a backup? The book and the poem? Alright, sounds like no matter what the situation is, whoever finds it is going to need the treasure money to cover lawyer fees. I don't think so at all. I really don't. I mean, it's going to be a civil dispute, and you know, ultimately the courts, either the courts are going to decide if there's no sort of legal document. If there's a legal document in there, if there's a legal document in there, then It's yours. There's no dispute. There's not going to be a dispute anyways. Fenn already said, well, what if there isn't any issue? And there's not going to be any issue because it's been so well documented that, hey, he's the one that left this behind, and he left it behind with the intentions of this becoming a treasure hunt and one person finding it. I don't think that there's going to be a legal dispute. I did originally, but now I don't think so. Speak with those who have met with Fenn one-on-one and see what Fenn says behind closed doors about the chest. It freaked me out. Jason may have gotten the same Q&A. I would love to hear about that, David Kramer, if you'd be interested in talking with me. Are you allowed to share? Okay. Ben Downing can't share. I don't have permission to share. Okay, fair enough. Did he really say he wishes he didn't put the bracelet in the chest? I believe that is a public statement. I thought he put it in because the bracelet was part of him. It's the only Indian bracelet that fit me. He did say, you know, between the story of him winning it in a game of pool and having it restored, and it has this, you know, he says it's the cheapest article or the cheapest artifact within the chest, but you know, it has sentimental value. I think he's doing that for us to pay more attention to that story, but I can't say for sure. And the little piece of him that's inside the chest, he says that he also put a little piece of him inside the chest that he's not going to talk about. But during the 6 questions with Jenny Kyle on Mysterious Writings, he talks about 2 hairs. I really think that those 2 hairs are for DNA. No doubt about it. I really think that that's why it's in there. Why would you put 2 hairs in a chest, right? And then, you know, the biography that he supposedly sent to the Library of Congress. People say it's not there. I'm saying, hey, it probably is there under like a different name because he knew that we would all go searching for it. And I also think that he also submitted those some hair, some DNA to some genealogy type thing. So that way, no matter what, the DNA is on record. So between the DNA, it being abandoned property, you know, the book and all the other documented stuff, there's going to be no argument of the person that keeps the chest. So I think the little piece of him that's inside the chest is those 2 hairs. Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but that's like my common sense kind of just tells me that. Bracelet was only worth a few $100. Okay, he put it in the chest because the guy who fixed it polished it and cleaned it, so Fenn was pissed. So into the chest it went. Now, he says the opposite of that, though. At first he was upset. He said at first he was upset, but it allowed him to see, or it allowed him to know, like, how people view things differently. You know, the Indian guy, or the person that fixed the Indian bracelet thought that it would have more beauty if it looked brand new, but Fenn wanted it to be as original, but it just allowed him to perceive it a different way, I guess. I'd have to pull up the exact quote. Alright, the bracelet is only worth a few $100. Maybe because it was an Indian artifact, there is some red tape. There is not any red tape if it was acquired prior to the Archaeological Resource Protection Act. And I'm sure that some of you guys heard about the raids that Fenn was involved with the BLM and the FBI and all those people that got hit. They got raided and freaking arrested. There was this huge fiasco, like ridiculous, because the place that artifacts were being gathered it was almost tradition to go out and look for artifacts there. People had been doing it from the time that they could walk, just a family tradition. Hey, let's go out, pick up arrowheads, pick up, pottery, so on and so forth. And then one day some skeevy little fuckhead, whatever his name is, he got in some trouble. Looks like a damn meth head, but he got in some trouble and decided to go wear a wire and freaking get all these other people caught up in an investigation. FBI raids, like, come kicking in doors of like 60 and 70-year-old men and like having guns drawn on them. You're talking about people that are practically harmless, and not even practically, like they're not going to do anything about it. And all these people got caught up in this court case and are facing, 20 years in prison, so on and so forth. And there was this doctor that ended up, he was very liked in the community, and he ended up, killing himself, and it caused public outrage. And I believe that because of that doctor committing suicide and causing that outrage, that's what caused the courts to just drop everything for the most part. I mean, we're talking about probation or whatever. Sure, grave robbing, yeah, I get it, right? And there's the Archaeological Resource Protection Act and all that. But that's why Fenn got lucky, right? Is the stuff that he acquired had been acquired prior to this Archaeological Resource Protection Act coming out. But within the Archaeological Resource Protection Act, we're not allowed to know where archaeological sites are. So like me, I'm a huge fan of metal detecting. I go almost every day. So if I happen to be swinging my detector, right, and I'm at a place that I didn't know was an archaeological site, and I happen to dig there, well, technically I broke the law. You know what I mean? So if these people are out looking for artifacts, like as a family tradition, they're digging up the ground just like archaeologists do. They come out there with freaking shovels. They have this big old sand sifter, and they're sifting everything, and they dig down deeper, for all the stuff that had settled down to the bottom. So they're digging deep, and next thing you know, they uncover a bone or something. They put it back, they cover it up. They're like, oh shit, but they wouldn't have known. Like, sure, if there's artifacts all over the ground, then obviously it's an archaeological site. And Fenn makes a comment of this in his Lorraine Mills interview. He says, who owns the past? And he says, whoever holds the title, or whoever owns the deed, whoever owns the property. And since this is government land, even though it's everywhere, right, thrown around and about everywhere, you can't pick an arrowhead off from the ground. What's these fucking archaeologists going to do? They're gonna come in, they're gonna survey the area, they're gonna take pictures. It's gonna get thrown in a box in the freaking basement or something, not put on display for the public. The public hasn't learned anything from archaeologists. The archaeologists, they write these reports to other archaeologists, but guess who aren't reading those reports? Other archaeologists. Who are they supposed to be informing? They're supposed to be informing us, the people, so we can be learning about the history. But instead, they throw out these confusing terms. They throw out, talking like one professor to another, but they're not doing anything to inform us. But us as the people aren't supposed to know where these sites are. So it is what it is. It's a jacked up law. The only difference is, like, hey, an archaeologist went to freaking college just to lie his ass off, collect some artifacts, throw it in the basement, or worse yet, throw it in the dumpster because they already have so many of that same Arrowhead freaking cataloged. So they take this stuff, they freaking throw it out or whatever, and they get mad because people like us are interested in the same thing. That's how archaeology started. A private, just a normal person interested in artifacts that happened to be wealthy donated a bunch of money to a school in Indiana, and he bought property, and he donated money to the school, and he said, I want you to put together a team, right, or put together a course to allow people to come to my property and dig for artifacts. And boom, that's where it all started. So a private collector is what started archaeology, but yet archaeologists seem to forget where they came from, and they forget that just normal everyday people are interested in artifacts too, and they want to slam you $250,000 fine, like, or up to 5-10 years in prison for what, picking up an arrowhead? Get out of here. That's why Fenn doesn't like archaeologists. I don't like archaeologists, and I debated on going to school for archaeology, and now I'm like, to hell with them. Like, that's a dick move. You're obviously in this career field because you find it interesting, but you're going to shame anybody else that happens to be interested in the same thing but didn't spend freaking $40, $50, $60, $100,000 to go to college. It's ridiculous. All right, I'm going to stop that rant because otherwise it'll keep going. So, Steve Klein, I'll agree with you, grave robbing, kind of jacked up. But if you don't know that the grave is there, how do you prevent that? Now, doesn't sound like any of these people went out and were digging up freaking mounds or digging up cemeteries or whatever. They're out there in the, you know, the dwellings that are in the cliff rocks, you know, like the little cliff dwellings and whatnot. And, like, sure, it's bound to happen, but, you know, lesson learned, freaking, if you didn't find your artifacts prior to 1973 or 75, I can't remember, or if the artifacts that you're buying from somebody aren't documented or have documentation or were found prior to that, don't buy them. Otherwise, you're going to get caught up in some freaking shady FBI raid from some freaking, from some meth head that's trying to freaking drop charges. Okay. BLM land is awesome. It's pretty interesting, but that's what drives me nuts. Like, all these treasures that I've researched, they always fall on a government piece of property, and the government property wasn't government property until after the legend of the treasure existed. Then they're like, we're going to scoop up all this land. Just like the BLM was pissed off that Fenn was finding all that stuff out at San Lazaro Pueblo, and they were trying to say, because it's split half and half, like, BLM owns one half, but Fenn owns the other half, and they were finding all the artifacts on Fenn's half, but trying to say, well, you took that from our side. Like, come on, man. Like, do your job, right? Don't just get a piece of property, be like, yeah, or find something on the ground and say, yep, this is an archaeological freaking site, and then just don't touch it for 100 years. Like, that's ridiculous. Why would you not, if you're going to deem something an archaeological site, why wouldn't you excavate it? Why wouldn't you, like, explore it? And that's where Fenn was different. He did explore it. He wasn't just like, hey, we're going to put an X on the map right here, and we're not going to... There's so many archaeological sites that they're not even touching. It's just property there, and they're just leaving it be. Alright, I wonder if Mika and Shiloh have looked for the chest. Do you think Fenn has told them not to look? Fenn has said that that the family doesn't talk about the treasure, and I want to say there was something about the grandson had mentioned about going on a treasure hunt. I don't know if it's his treasure or whatever, but I could also be confusing that with something else. Alright, they F up when they sold the artifacts for money. Fair enough, but I mean, people do that. People sell antiques all the time. According to the Antiquities Act, anything that's uncovered over, I can't remember if it's 50 or 100 years old, it's supposedly freaking covered by the Antiquities Act. So it's like, can I not go to an antique store and buy something? You know, if I'm out metal detecting and I happen to find, you know, a freaking, I don't know, let's say like a Civil War button or something. You know, that's more than 100 years old. I'm going to freaking, if it's valuable, I'm going to sell it. And what's the issue in that? The issue is when you start crossing boundaries, right, and digging up bones and like grave robbing. Totally understand that. But that's not the majority of what these people are doing. And a lot of the people, and it has to be $500 in value or more. All right, for you to get slammed with the felony or whatever. But like a lot of these people, they just got artifacts and they would barter and trade it for other artifacts and so on and so forth. But I mean, essentially, Fenn is selling artifacts. He has pottery. He has arrowheads. He has all this stuff that was part of his gallery. So he's doing the same thing. So what makes it okay for one person to do it and not another? And that's where my disconnect in my argument is, like, it shouldn't matter. The past should belong to everybody. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that before I start, like, hurting feelings and stuff. By not taking the items and selling them for profit, that's how. I don't think hairs have DNA unless you have root part of it. No, I don't think that's true, because that's how, like, forensics freaking find out who killed somebody, is just a small hair fiber, like an eyebrow lash or something that came, or something, a hair that was found on an article of clothing. So Sledneck saying that's correct, so that's something that I'm going to have to look into. Gardner was the name of the person that dimed everybody out during that the BLM during the artifacts, BLM, FBI crap. So, undercover fucking meth head. Alright. So, how do you think Fenn will know if he or she... I don't know. I have no idea. Part of me thinks that, you know, the bracelet was the way that he's going to know. But that would imply that Fenn thought that the treasure was going to be found by now. Or before he passed away. So, I really don't know. I don't know how he knows that it's going to be found. But he also says he knows that, or he thinks that the person that finds it isn't going to be the type of person that stays quiet about it. So, I don't know. I wish I had the answer, because I feel like that answer would probably tell us a lot. Like, if we knew how Fenn was going to know, then it'd probably help us narrow down the search area. And he says he can't get back to the place yet, and that getting into that place was like one of the most audacious freaking things that he had ever done. So I don't think it's like right next to his house where he can drive to and get to it, because he says he can't get to it anymore. Like, part of me thinks like, oh, if you're trying to keep an eye on something, you're going to have it close to home. But if you have something close to home, you think that you could easily get to it again. But at the same time, he did want to die there. So would he want to, you know, if he knew that he was, would he want to drive 4 states away just to take a bottle of freaking pills and overdose on top of the chest, or would he want to do it close to home? So it's definitely a couple things to think about. But all right, I appreciate you guys sticking around. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I don't like going this long because I know that, you know, people will look at the time and probably not watch it. But yeah, hopefully I talked about some stuff that you guys find interesting. Sorry for my 20-minute rant about archaeologists. And yeah, I think that about sums it up. So please don't forget to like the video. Let your friends know about it so they can come watch. And if you have any thoughts, you want to email me, go ahead and email me at fenntreasurethoughts@gmail.com. And go ahead and leave your comments below, shoot me an email, whatever. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Looks like I have 189 subscribers. Not bad. If some more people want to subscribe, then go ahead. I'm not planning on getting rich off from this by any means. So, but all right, I'm gonna go spend some time with the family, and I hope you guys all have a good day. All right.